Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and we're here once again to talk about the brewing legislative battle between state legislators like Chris Lee of Hawaii and the games industry. So far, attempts at legislation appear to be moving along, and as a result, the ESA is now slowly becoming involved as they can see troubled waters on the horizon. However, to call their current involvement laughable would be a bit of an understatement. The ESA, or Entertainment Software Association, is the lobbyist group for the AAA publishers and is the parent organization for the ESRB, or the Entertainment Software Rating Board, which is the US version of PEGI, the Pan-European Game Information. The ESRB acts as a self-regulatory body for the games industry to provide age ratings and warnings based upon different types of content. Its stated intention is to allow parents to make a better informed decision in regards to the video games they purchase. The ESRB itself was brought into being due to a U.S. congressional hearing in December of 1993 that took place over growing concerns that the games industry was irresponsibly marketing violent video games to minors. At the centerpiece of that conversation was the first Mortal Kombat video game that was released in arcades in 1992, which sported fatalities and other bloody forms of combat and finishing moves. A few short months later, Senator Joe Lieberman introduced the Video Game Rating Act in February of 1994. This act sought to establish a federal commission to create an industry-wide standard for game ratings. The proposed law would not be passed if the game industry instituted a voluntary method of standardized self-regulation. This resulted in the creation of the Interactive Digital Software Association, which later became the ESA by Nintendo, Sega, Electronic Arts, Acclaim, and several others. This, of course, gave birth to the ESRB, the gaming industry's current standard for ratings. Now, obviously, because the ESA is the parent entity for the ESRB, it's no small wonder that the ESA would always turn to it as its default statement in defending things such as loot boxes within their games. However, it's worth noting that the current system does not have any rating in place that covers loot boxes, as they do not classify loot boxes as gambling. In a recent video published by Chris Lee, who is fast becoming as close as a politician can get to being a hero to many gamers, we're shown that the process of legislation in regards to loot boxes is continuing within Hawaii, and during part of that process, the ESA lobbyists decided to make an appearance. Although, as I said, it would seem that the ESA representatives were woefully underprepared to discuss loot boxes, and his attempted arguments don't even fit the discussion at hand in some cases.
Thank you both for your testimony and time. Clearly, just reading through, I think, the comments here and the testimony, the gaming industry is now a $36 billion industry, which is sizable, 3 times the size plus of the film industry in this country. And its rate of growth has been very rapid in the last 5-6 years, which I'm sure provides a significant sense of pride and accomplishment to some of these companies. But I think one of the things that really has precipitated this question is some of the feedback from the community, not just here in Hawaii, but of course elsewhere as well. And since I've been talking about this issue, which originated this bill, and we've heard from hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of folks, stories of addiction and financial harm and horror stories from families, even right here in Hawaii in our own community. And I guess the question is it concerning that there are significant numbers of people, and especially kids in many cases, who are ending up with problems with addiction as a result of some of these mechanisms?
Well, Representative Lee, I think first of all, I think that was one of the things that was recognized by the industry to create the board, the review board, the self-imposed review rating board. And if I can recall, I think there is one category for children. They actually have similar to movies. So, you could say movies are
the ESRB referring to
the ESRB, that they have those ratings and they have it for children. So I think the industry recognized that there was an issue, and so they brought this upon themselves. As a matter of fact, they've taken it one step further. They've gone international to get this rating board approved on their game. So I think they've been very proactive.
Now, if you'll allow me a brief indulgence, as is common with the ESA, this representative's comments are extremely misrepresentative and highly misleading. We know that the ESRB was created not out of a desire for the games industry to be proactive in its protections provided to the consumer, but was out of a response to a direct threat of legal action being instituted by the US government if they didn't do something. Also, their desire to push the influence of the ESRB to other countries is born out of a similar desire for self-regulation as opposed to government oversight. To a corporation, it is always better to directly control the regulatory body that is supposed to be controlling you as opposed to the government imposing laws and standards. After all, as the ESA controls the ESRB, they can fudge the ratings from time to time without fear of governmental censure or repercussions.
The issue of which has been raised here with respect to in-game gambling-like mechanics, loot boxes, that sort of thing, that's something the ESRB currently rates.
I couldn't answer that. I'd have to go back.
Mr. Wade, can you answer that question?
The answer is no. The inclusion of gambling-like mechanics, specifically variable reward microtransactions, do not affect ESRB rating. In fact, the ESRB, one of their few public statements about the issue has been, this is legally not gambling, basically.
Now, it's also worth noting here that I'm not quite sure who the gentleman on the right of the video is, but I'm curious if he actually works for the ESA or not, and if he is working for the ESA, why isn't he talking more, as the guy on the left obviously has no idea what the hell is going on.
The UK Gambling Commission, among others, seems to identify this, or portions of this at least, as gambling. Their annual report recently just found that 45% of 11 to 16-year-olds are aware of what's called skins betting, where you have products which you earn out of randomized loot boxes, which you can purchase, which can then be traded for cash. So fundamentally, that seems to be gambling, if you can cash out these things for real monetary value. Is it not?
I cannot answer that.
And this is the underpreparedness that I was talking about in regards to the ESA representative. Chris Lee is, of course, speaking about third-party gambling sites that deal in loot boxes and loot box cosmetics for games like CSGO and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. These sites make use of the Steam API provided by Valve to directly interface their systems to the Steam marketplace in order to direct purchase skins when people cash out on their sites. This allows these gambling sites to not maintain any form of actual inventory of the skins being gambled on their sites. Now, that is worth noting, as these sites are absolutely gambling. That is something that no one can argue. However, because these sites are related to video games and they operate online with, quote, non-monetary goods, they have so far been able to skirt regulatory standards and laws that prevent odds manipulation and also require casinos to maintain cash for every chip they have on the floor. That's not the case with these sites. They don't have to maintain inventory of these skins that are being gambled on the site.
When it comes to, and just for Bruce again, when it comes to loot boxes and that sort of thing, how does a player know their odds of winning something that they're paying for?
Well, first of all, I think the loot boxes, and that if I recall, that's an option. You have the option of purchasing, or you can, if correct me, but I think you can get to the end game, the same way without the loot box. Is that, if I'm understanding what you're...
I think if people are buying something,
you have the option to go with the loot box.
Yes, you have the option with the loot boxes. You don't have to get them. It's all about providing player choice. The gaming industry is giving you more content by providing you with this choice. That's at least what they keep telling us at any rate. The gentleman from the ESA, of course, fails to take into account the interminable grind instituted in many of these games, not to mention dozens of other manipulative practices within the games themselves to push a person towards purchasing loot boxes, and thankfully Chris Lee is more than up to the task of pointing some of that out.
When Star Wars Battlefront 2, an EA game, came out, one thing that really shocked players was, one, loot boxes directly affect your ability to progress in the game, right? Two, and this is the thing that really got people's attention, was that when you are killed in the game, there's a screen that shows you what power-ups that are available only through loot boxes were used to defeat you in the game. So like that, there is a direct line between the things that the CEO was saying and the mechanics that were eventually implemented.
But
right?
Just for correction, when that came out, wasn't that in beta form? And I think when you came back from the gamers that it wasn't put in the final game?
Yes, that is correct. Okay. And I believe there's been statements released from EA just in the last few weeks saying they're returning those mechanisms to the game.
Well, that I'm not aware of, but just so we're clear, so when that did come out, it was in beta form, and they did hear back that, so they took it out.
Now, of course, it's to be expected that the ESA representative would fall back on it wasn't in the final game. This is merely a continuation of the concept of outdating the outrage by saying, yeah, it was just a test, they were trying to find a balance, but that's not actually what's there now, so you can't be mad about it. But overall, while the ESA representative's handling of the situation was particularly inept, it is extremely telling in several ways. Most important of which is that the threat of classifying loot boxes as gambling is something that the games industry does not want. Disclosing drop percentages is something the games industry does not want. Any form of external regulation of loot box gambling is something they do not want because, in all honesty, it's their gravy train and they don't want it to stop flowing. In 2017, the U.S. video game industry was a $15 billion per year industry, and analysts predicted at that time that by 2019 it would raise to $19.6 billion per year, which is an extremely impressive growth rate. Thanks entirely to loot boxes and manipulative microtransaction practices, the ESA is listing quite proudly on their main website that the U.S. video game industry revenue reached $36 billion in 2017, and this is just within the US. Now that means that the US gaming market now nearly matches worldwide box office revenue, which is reported at $40 billion in 2017. And with that kind of money sitting on the table now being potentially at risk, the ESA is beginning to stop and realize that there actually is a danger to their wallets taking place right now. And while their current efforts are laughable at best, they won't continue to be so as the threat of government regulatory standards looms closer and closer. But as always, please do let me know what you think down in the comments below. So far, from Chris Lee, we've had the line, "It's a trap" used, as well as now throwing in the phrase, "sense of pride and accomplishment" back in the face of the AAA industry. It'll be interesting to see how many other one-liners Chris Lee is able to throw out. And did I miss any? Feel free to let me know. A special thanks to this channel's Patreon supporters, especially the 20 and Up Club, whose continued generosity helps to save the channel from YouTube's partial demonetization AI abomination. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.